Joining us now, Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia, former vice presidential candidate, 2016 for Hillary Clinton. Senator Kaine, good to have you with us, man.
Hey, John, good to be back, man.
Okay, well, it's been a while, and
it has been. I mean, I think I kind of owe you a beverage, and you kind of owe me one, because you were a Trump guy and you're candidate one, so I owe you a beverage. But you were the Trump chair in Virginia, and we won Virginia handily, so you owe me one.
Well, actually, you crushed me in Virginia. You beat me by 250,000 or something like that, and 5%. And so I want to congratulate you on that. Plus, Virginia was the only southern state that Clinton won, and the only state on our battleground list that Clinton won. So, look, that's why I'm speaking with you today on the radio and not in the White House, right? I mean,
indeed. I'm sitting in my Senate office, so with no entourage.
That's right. So good. All right, well, that's fabulous. Now, look, we got a lot to talk about today. Russia, hacks, all this stuff going on, Flynn. But just share with our audience, November 8th, I was in Trump Tower. I think I was only one of a handful of people that actually knew we were going to win. A lot of people did not. You guys were the favorite. At what time exactly on November 8th did you personally realize you were going to lose the election?
Yeah, John, no, great question. I tell you, I gave virtually the same speech for 105 days where I told people, don't believe what you read. We're the underdog. There's never been a woman president in this country, and if it was easy, there would have been one. So I did feel like we would probably win, but I was very, very wary about overconfidence. I managed my expectations well during the whole campaign and told virtually every audience I spoke with, we're trying to do something that's never been done. I will say this, at 7:45 election night in New York, I learned what the Chesterfield return was, and you are an expert at this too. We use Chesterfield because it's a big jurisdiction and they tend to return their vote totals early, and by 7:45 they had, and I was able to look at that and say, we're going to win by more than President Obama won Virginia in 2012. So I told the Hillary team that. I said, hey, look, guys, they're not going to call it for a couple hours, but we're going to win by a bigger margin than President Obama did, which we did. And for about an hour and 45 minutes then, I was in a real good mood because the notion that we would win Virginia by significantly more than 2012 but lose, I did not think that was going to happen. So, but about 9:30 or so with the upper Midwest, I started to realize, wait, I think this is going to be a very long night. So I had an hour and 45 minutes of irrational exuberance, but by 9:30, it was looking tough.
You know, I can't believe you said that because I was in New York. I think we were at the Hilton, and I looked at the exact same results from Chesterfield, and it was like, I think I looked at about 7:50, and I'll never forget that. I was there with Fräulein, my wife, and I texted who was my liaison, and I said, we're going to lose Virginia. So same result, same almost 5 minutes from each other. That Chesterfield did not look good for us. I knew we had to win that bigger, and it was over then. Let's get to some of the issues. We're going to talk about Russia in a second. You made one comment, Senator, the other day that you've got some criticism on, which basically said, look, we have to take this fight to the streets. You want to explain exactly what you meant by that?
Yeah, we had this amazing Women's March the day after the inauguration, and then these amazing and peaceful protests surrounding the Trump immigration orders a couple weeks later, and I was with some of the folks at Dulles who were saying, "Welcome, Virginia's for lovers. We're not a hateful place." And I basically said it was with respect to the immigration orders. In this administration, we will have to be waging fights in Congress, in the courts, in state houses, at the ballot box, online, and in the streets. Now, I obviously didn't mean I was going to punch members of Congress or punch federal judges or punch a ballot box or punch a computer or punch anybody in the streets. This is obviously Amendment 1 to the Constitution. The people have a right to peacefully assemble and petition their government for redress of grievances. Some people have said Tim Kaine was encouraging violence. Anybody who knows me, knows it wasn't true, and anybody who reads the whole statement knows that's not what I was saying. But I will say this. I do think the Trump administration feels extremely threatened by peaceful protest of the kind that they've been seeing to their policies, beginning with the day after inauguration. But we have a 230-year constitutional democracy, and there are checks in it. Congress is a check, the courts are a check, the press is a check, and the right of people to peacefully assemble and petition is a check. And I think these are all systems that are going to be tested very vigorously here over the next couple of years.
Well, I think you're 100% right. I figured that was a metaphor, but look, I take a very different position in the Trump movement. I encourage the activists on the other side. I encourage the protesters because, from my point of view, as long as they keep doing what they're doing, then Trump is delivering on the promises he made on behalf of the movement. So I think he should wear it like a badge of honor. And I don't think anybody in the administration should be whining about it. They should be saying, hey, great. And I don't think the congressmen that have town hall meetings where they cut them an hour short, I think stand there and get the questions and get
you and I are in the same place on this because you're part of the Fourth Estate. You're also part of the First Amendment as press on the petition and protest and be in the street as long as it's peaceful. That's the framers put that word in for a very particular reason: the right of people to peacefully assemble and petition their government for a right for redress of grievances. That is in the First Amendment. It's in the First Amendment for a reason. It's to be encouraged, not discouraged.
That's right. Stop whining and go have your town hall meetings and let's engage in a dialogue. And I think that's ultimately going to be helpful. Now, let's get to Russia, the Mike Flynn situation. What is really troubling you, Senator Kaine, about this situation?
You know, that's a big question. Russia was defined by the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Joe Dunford, as the adversary in the world that we should most be concerned about. And he basically testified to that before the Armed Services Committee where I sat a year and a half ago, and he said it's because of their capacity and because they've demonstrated an intent to use their capacity. They, by the conclusion of all of our intelligence agencies, engaged in an unprecedented cyber attack of this presidential election. Tom Friedman's article in the New York Times yesterday said we were attacked on December 7, 1941, we were attacked on September 11, 2001, and we were attacked on November 8, 2016. In addition to that, the communications between General Flynn in the lame duck session, and then once he became National Security Advisor with a principal adversary, and then some effort to cover it up for a few weeks, highly, highly troubling. John, I was a little bit a victim of this. You know, on the campaign trail, one day the Russian-engineered dump of data from the DNC included my cell phone number, and then my voicemail filled up with a lot of really vile and extreme messages. But even more than that, my son was deployed overseas with a 1,200-member Marine battalion, training right on the Russian border, training the militaries of the Baltics to protect themselves against Russian aggression. And the notion that we would be deploying thousands of Army and Marine troops on the front line to protect our allies, but at the same time have a national security advisor who is cozying up to sharing information with the Russians, highly, highly troubling. So we've got to get to the bottom of all of the communication between the Trump campaign, but then also the Trump administration and the Russians to figure out, you know, what the heck is going on in terms of the ties between the administration and the nation who our head of our Joint Chiefs of Staff says is the most dangerous adversary we have in the world right now.
Well, Senator, there's policy and there's did somebody violate the Logan Act or break the law? I think Trump's policy on this is clear. He would like to engage the Russian Federation in a way that they can become not an adversary of ours, find some common ground. And as you know, one thing that we all agree on is he's trying to get us out of these wars. And I hope you're going to continue to ask for President Trump to come to Congress. I mean,
Absolutely.
Now we find out a leak that we're going to send additional troops in this. Now we're back to the whole thing. No objective, no declaration of war. We're sending our young men and women. We don't know why. And I hope you're going to continue to pursue that.
Absolutely, John. As you know, I was very tough on President Obama, who I generally supported over this for waging a war that's into year 3 now without a congressional authorization vote. But I was even tougher on Congress for not having the backbone to do it. Frankly, the Russian cyber attack has kind of added to the momentum on the committees that I serve, Armed Services and Foreign Relations, we need to go back and check the authorities that we have and make sure that we're doing this right. So I'm having good discussions with both Senators Corker and Cardin, who are my chair and ranking on Foreign Relations, Senators McCain and Reid, who are my chair and ranking on Armed Services, about this. General Mattis, as you know, is in the midst of an assessment of the current ongoing campaign against ISIS, and then is going to lay out, hopefully by the end of the month or early March, kind of next chapters forward. But it's time that this Congress basically put their validation on what we are doing, and if we don't feel comfortable that there's an objective and an end result and that there's a purpose to it, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Let's get to General Flynn. I'm of the opinion, look, I'm not there, but I'm of the opinion that he really exercised very bad judgment. Then it became clear that he was not altogether forthright with the vice president. I don't know how you stay in that job with that sensitivity.
Yeah.
Exercising bad judgment. I mean, he took one of the phone calls at the beach in Puerto Rico. I mean, this guy was a senior intelligence officer, very decorated. Did you think that was a little brazen?
I had grave concern, John, about General Flynn that I expressed the moment that he was appointed. Remember, this is a guy who would retweet weird conspiracy theories, Hillary Clinton involved in a sex ring and things like that, and he would retweet those out as if they were valid. His son tweeted out this bizarre claim about a sex ring being run out of a pizza joint in Washington, and it led somebody from North Carolina to travel up here with a weapon and start shooting the place up. Right. But General Flynn thought this stuff was, right, valid enough to send around, and so when he was first appointed, I said, here is a guy who is going to be the president's chief advisor on national security, but he falls for things that a gullible fourth grader wouldn't follow for. He's either so gullible or so consumed with malice that he has a hard time understanding what's true and what's false. He's the wrong person for the position. And then, once he got into the position, it sounded as if, based on all the reports, that he engaged in the discussion with the Russian government in possible violation of the Logan Act, saying, hey, look, don't worry about these sanctions that President Obama just did. We're going to lift the sanctions when we come in. Those sanctions bear on a lot of things. They bear on Secretary of State Tillerson's previous work where he was doing oil deals with the Russians. They may bear on Donald Trump's personal finances. We don't know because of the absence of tax returns. But the fact that he is basically trying to give the Russians comfort that we would lift the sanctions, very, very troubling. And then obviously he lied about it to the vice president based on the reports. The thing that's odd, though, John, is the White House was briefed weeks ago on the fact of Flynn's calls and that he had been misrepresenting the calls to the vice president and others. They didn't let him go. They didn't even tell Vice President Pence about it based on reports that have come out. It was only when this hit the press a couple weeks later that it became untenable and he had to leave. It's not all right to lie to people or the American public and then, I only get fired if I get, if it hits the newspapers. If you're caught lying on something as significant as that, it shouldn't take a news story for you to get fired.
I agree with that. And I think Vice President Pence should have been told immediately. I would only have to think that the president engaged his general counsel, Don McGahn. He wanted to find out if the Logan Act had been violated, if the act was illegal. And it seems perhaps, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, that they were doing their due diligence. But it seems to me if you're going to allegedly not be forthright with the Vice President of the United States, I don't see how you stay in that job. Also, I just thought that the calls he made pre-inauguration were cavalier.
Yeah.
And
your point about the call from the beach. there's some cavalier elements to this. And remember, there is a national security apparatus that monitors calls with foreign agents.
Of course.
This is part of what we do to protect our security. So if you're using, an unsecured cell phone and you're calling some foreign agent and talking about U.S. policy, especially as somebody who had a high-ranking position in a defense intelligence agency, you know what our intel guys are doing. Those are calls that are going to be picked up, and there's going to be a record of those calls and a transcript of those calls. If I call you and we're talking about sports or going to a birthday party or something, nobody's picking up those calls. But if you call known foreign agents, you got to understand that people are paying attention to that.
Well, and he knew that because he was in the intel community. He was highly decorated, so he knew that. So the only words you come up with is cavalier, brazen, exercise of bad judgment. So I don't think he could stay in the job. And I think at the end of the day, President Trump did the right thing without a doubt. Let's get to these leaks, though, because they're separate, right? What happened? Just one other aside here. The people complaining about the release of the transcript, we can only assume that FBI Director Comey went to the FISA court and got a warrant, right? Because at the time, Flynn was a private citizen, which is part of the Patriot Act that, of course, I was in opposition to, that the Republicans passed. So I don't see what they passed it, right?
Right.
Am I right?
I mean, you're making an assumption that is probably true. But I don't know it to be true for certainty. So how that transcript became available, but that is probably the case. The leak culture here in the first couple of weeks, it's been intense. Remember, though, you kind of create your own condition. When President Trump was a candidate, he was celebrating WikiLeaks. He was saying to the Russians, "Hey, hack into Hillary, find what you can. It should all be out there." And if you create a culture where, hey, this is cool, this is a good thing, I want this to happen, then we can all be hoist by our own petard. And to some degree, I think that's what's happening with the administration. Leaks are also usually a function of management. I mean, I think well-run organizations have fewer leaks. Organizations where there's problems have more, and so that's an issue that they got to get a hold of.
Certainly, you got the leaks in the administration that the administration has to get a hold of. There's various factions, Senator, but wouldn't you agree that these leaks coming out of the State Department or Defense or other things that could be sent? I mean, you're a student of history, right? President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger went through the same thing in 1969, and they had secret back-channel dialogues where they wouldn't even provide info to their Joint Chiefs of Staff, people in the Defense Department. I mean, isn't this really a security issue, these leaks, and problematic, and also a violation of the law?
Likely. I mean, look, any release of material that's classified is a violation of the law, and it's troubling. But I think the president, and this is to his discredit, he will often say, "Well, gosh, I'm mad at the leakers," without addressing the substance of the content. So some of the leaks recently that have been about this extensive contact between his key campaign aides and the Russians during the campaign, he just says, well, that's fake news and that's a leak. But he doesn't want to address the content of it. And the content's really important. Again, if just take the facts that we have. We have a head of a Joint Chiefs of Staff sitting who says Russia is the principal adversary of the United States because of their military capacity and then the intent they've shown to use it. We've got a documented cyber attack on an American presidential election by the government of Russia to influence the outcome, to favor one candidate over another. And now you have stories that were appearing yesterday about extensive contacts between key Trump officials and Russia. And General Flynn resigning, it's the third key Trump aide that's had to resign or step aside because of contacts with Russia, 2 during the campaign and now 1 during the administration. This is very, very serious stuff. I don't think we've ever seen a national security challenge quite like this, an allegation that a foreign government hacked in to influence the presidential election. And that's why Congress has to get to the bottom of it. You mentioned Nixon, so we all know the Watergate story. The Watergate break-in was kind of a bungled, amateurish thing. It didn't affect the 1972 presidential election. Far from it. That was the biggest landslide ever, but Congress still took it seriously enough in a bipartisan way to investigate it because they cared about the integrity of the American electoral system. Congress is under the microscope right now, and we're undergoing a test. Are we serious about the integrity of our electoral system or not? If we are, we will pursue this till every question is answered. But if there's an effort to sweep it under the rug or stop, we will have flunked the test of being that Article I branch we're supposed to be.
Well, if they haven't done anything wrong, then they should not be concerned about the invasion. Senator Kaine, we're out of time. Just quick final question. Any concern you have about this Russian spy ship 13 miles out of the coast of Delaware?
Yeah, there's a Russian spy ship that has been cruising through the Caribbean and up the Atlantic coast that's near. It is in international waters, but it is in proximity to a key submarine base that we have in Connecticut. And this is not unusual. It's happened before, but it's not something you do to a friend. And so this is just another bit of evidence that people should not be naive about Putin's a good guy or, Russia's people we can deal with as allies. That's not the case. Go talk to the Syrians who are being barrel bombed by Bashar al-Assad with Russia's help, or go talk to the folks in eastern Ukraine who've been invaded. This is serious biz, and that makes some of the allegations about contact between the administration and Russia, frankly, even more troubling.
Okay, Senator, we're out of time. I want to thank Senator Tim Kaine for joining us today, former vice presidential candidate under Hillary Clinton 2016. Senator, it's always an honor to have you on, sir.
Yeah, John, good to be with you. Thanks so much.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.